What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic. And when it comes to theme parks, people think of having a good time with friends and family, going to restaurants, riding rides. It's not often that you think about heists of restaurants using some inventive ways in which to do so, but that seemingly happened over at Disney Springs last night, as there was over $10,000 stolen from paddlefish. And it's not just the fact that the money was stolen, it was how elaborate this was and how it got stolen. So we're going to talk about this story and get some thoughts on it, because it's kind of something you might see out of like Mission Impossible maybe. It's very interesting. So originally there was a report on this by WWNT. Basically said there's a burglary, not a lot of details, that happened around midnight. And they weren't sure if anybody was in the restaurant, although the paddlefish closes at 11. So as soon as I read that, I assumed, having worked in a very short tenure at a restaurant, which was Brahms, which I'm surprised I'm allowed back in there.
I got no place else to go.
But typically you are there very late, or at least a couple of hours after closing, when you're cleaning up and counting money and things like that. And that seems to be exactly what happened here, as a burglar used scuba gear to swim in the water to get to paddlefish here. So it says the burglar who stole cash from paddlefish at Disney Springs was wearing scuba gear and took thousands of dollars. The Orange County Sheriff's Office stated earlier today that an unknown man entered the business after hours, took some cash, and left. And then, like I said, it happened just after midnight. And then WFTV9 shared new details from a report released by the Sheriff's Office. The man apparently swam up to Paddlefish, which is a steamboat restaurant docked at Disney Springs. He found a place to store his wetsuit and scuba gear before entering the manager's office, where two employees were counting cash from the day to place in the safe. The report is redacted, but the man forced the employees to go into a corner of the room and close their eyes. According to WFTV9's sources, he tied up the employees. So that's got real serious real quick. I mean, I suppose it's one thing to go steal, which is already just a terrible idea, but to actually hold people hostage, this is a whole other level, which I would imagine is going to bring a whole lot more intensity to finding out who did this. He then stole between $10,000 and $20,000, according to the employees. He left within 2 minutes. They called 911 after freeing themselves, so he didn't even let them out. They just had to free themselves. Neither were hurt, and the burglar did not brandish any weapons. Investigators believe the man then put on his scuba gear and jumped back into the Disney Springs lake. He was not found after an immediate search. And there's actually a photo here, which is not going to be any use of finding out who did this, because he was in complete scuba gear and looked like he probably spray painted the camera. The sheriff's office released a picture of the man seemingly spray painting a security camera. The employees described him as slim, approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall, and wearing tight clothing and a blue beanie. Paddlefish opened as usual on Monday, though. So this seems like a rather elaborate scheme, at least to me. And I'm not a detective here, but...
Or maybe he got taken for a ride.
I feel like this is somebody who potentially knows the inner workings of this restaurant, knowing how to get in here, where to go, how much cash would be on hand. Because I'm actually surprised to hear that much money is on hand, but you are talking about the end of the night. So perhaps that was how much cash they had on hand the entire night. But typically this is why restaurants and fast food places, they don't keep a lot of cash on hand for this very reason, not only in case you are robbed or you don't lose a lot of money, but also just to cut down on the incentive for people to try and rob you. So you could be potentially looking at a current or former employee that knows the inner workings, or somebody at the restaurant told somebody. I mean, I'm just speculating here, but I have a hard time believing that somebody just randomly decided to go to these lengths to rob a single restaurant here, scuba gear and all these things, if they did not know there was that much money in the safe. That would just be my guess. Granted, my guessing comes from watching, crime movies and dramas, but I feel like this is something you would see out of Mission Impossible, about scuba diving through here to do this, because obviously you can walk up to paddlefish, which you're not going to be able to get in after closing time. So seemingly they had to have known another way to get in, and going through the water that's one way to do it. I can't ever say I've heard of a restaurant being robbed via scuba gear and then getting away. So obviously, even after it happened, I mean, obviously it's at night. Not a lot of people were probably looking for him until authorities were called. But given the description and given the fact that you know, that's what you have to go off of, unless, you know, when he was speaking, if people were able to recognize the voice. I don't know if they'll find this guy. I mean, I'm sure there's ways in which you can still find people who did this, but when you're talking about cash, it's not really traceable, considering you know, you can just have cash on hand. But this is a wild story. So I mean, you could be talking about an employee, a former employee, or perhaps somebody that was a guest at Disney World that was shocked at the prices while they were on vacation and decided, I got to pay for this trip somehow.
Oh, there it is.
And decided to go to these links. Obviously, I'm kidding, but you know, over $10,000, anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 is not a small amount of money. And again, if you're talking about, if you know the inner workings of a restaurant, when they typically have certain cash on hand, maybe they would know when you know, they take a deposit. You know, most businesses will have usually a daily deposit of cash, but sometimes it may be at a set frequency that they do it. If they had inside knowledge about that, especially that close to closing time, which means they probably knew when, you know, the manager was going to be in the office to put the cash into the safe, because the safe would have to be open. So at this point, you'd have to know a lot of things, because if the safe is closed, unless you knew the combination, you know, unless you are a world-class safe breaker, you may not be able to get in there. So from the outside looking in, with literally zero information on this, just me reading this story and talking about it here on YouTube, I would find this hard to believe that this was somebody who did not know the inner workings of paddlefish. I kind of find it hard to believe that somebody would go to this length to do something and just hoping that they would find cash on hand or employees that they could steal from, especially so close to whenever it actually closed. But because you also would have to know that you could, you know, there were still people in there. You could still get in there potentially. They may know which side doors are unlocked, you know, maybe, you know, stuff like that. But in terms of catching the person, unless they were able to identify the voice, or maybe it was a situation where they knew the entire time, like, oh, this is Rick. Rick got fired, you know, a month ago, and, you know, you can hear his voice. But just off of the, you know, picture they have out there, I mean, that's not going to help anybody. I don't think he's going to walk around wearing this outfit to be able to identify who he is or who he, you know, who did this. But yeah, if you're an employee there, that, I'm sure that was a little scary. The fact that he didn't use a weapon either, I mean, I suppose that's better than someone waving a weapon in your face, but being tied up and being robbed, I mean, that, you know, that's not going to be a good time for the employees there, undoubtedly. It just, you know, comes to remind you that even at Disney World, Universal Studios and places like that, things like this can happen. But I don't recall ever seeing a situation like this where maybe they watched Mission Impossible and decided to act out a scene from it. But either way, I suppose we will wait and see if there's any updates on this, if they catch this guy. So I guess we'll see what happens with this. But as of now, that is the story here. And this seems to be updated at least once today. So it could have an update later this week. But I guess we'll see what the culmination of this, if there is one eventually. But paddlefish was robbed for $10,000 to $20,000 by a man in a scuba gear swimming in the lake at Disney Springs. Not something you hear all the time there. But either way, that's going to be it, though, for this video. So if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about this? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.